I'm interested to see how this goes. They were very chummy on social media, so let's see how the conversation goes.
Piers.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Last time, obviously, we did it remotely.
Yes.
You were here. I was in London, and you complained that it was an unfair situation. You couldn't see me. Your earpiece kept falling out.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, fair enough. I hear you. I got on a plane. I flew 6,500 miles. And not only that, we're doing it in somewhere that is very familiar to you. It's the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, where you performed many times as a stand-up. So I've done my bit.
You did. But actually, this is not the first time we meet in person.
No, we did originally
we did.
in London last year.
And I know that many people are watching this for the first time. I would know this, but like I would really love to tell the story of that moment because I was having a tour in the UK and Europe, and I was doing my English stand-up. And one of my, advertising promotion plan was to come on your show. So my agent called me, it's like, Bassem, you're going to be on Piers Morgan. I said, damn. It's like, what's wrong? It's like, well, Piers Morgan blocked me on Twitter.
I did.
And he said, like, what did you do? I said, well, during January 6th, the insurrection, you tweeted something about it. And I was so angry at what's happening. And I remember you having you and Donald Trump in a picture. And I said the guy who had Donald Trump with him, whatever. And then I used like very harsh words. And of course,
Yo,
BWA.
Netanyahu, thank you for the $20 dono. That's some real BWA energy. Thank you for introducing that to the stream. I appreciate it incredibly much. It's gonna allow me to eat good.
You blocked me. So and then I said, like, does he know? I don't know. Does he know? I don't know. Does he know? I don't know. So I walked into the studio.
I just love how
And the moment I
expressive he
was
is.
like being seated and they're preparing before we go on air, and you said, oh, hi, Bassem. It seems that you have more followers than me, but it seems that I blocked you. Why? And I told you, and then we said the story on air. And it was funny because I made the joke, I was like, you have always been standing against cancel culture, and you just canceled me on Twitter. But we agreed that this is not canceling because this is your own space and you're free, but now you're unblocked me, and we're
here.
And we're here.
Malachi!
Totally not thirst dono. Peepo comfy.
Thank you. I always forget that the text-to-speech reads out emojis. Peepo comfy indeed. And thank you for the totally not thirst dono. I appreciate it. It will help me a lot. Thank you.
By the way, just for the record.
Yeah,
I was, don't know about you, maybe you weren't surprised. I was completely staggered by the response globally to our interview several weeks ago. Were you taken aback by the scale of it?
Yes, of course, but I understand why. For many years, the media covering the Middle East has been showing a certain point of view. I'm not going to say bias, but
Same little morphine,
I would
Annie.
say it did not allow certain voices, certain voices from the other side to be heard. And that is why you see the frustration. Whenever you speak to people in the Middle East, they tell you the same thing. They're not very happy with the coverage of the Middle East because our voices are not heard. Now, I am the...
By the way, ignore the irony of me pausing him to say this, but it's been really heartening to see like people in the Middle East responding to my coverage of this Israel-Palestine situation, and legitimately like I've read your comments, like telling me that like you haven't seen much of this perspective, and I'm glad, and like thanking me for my coverage, and just like I'm glad that I'm resonating, because sometimes this job in particular can really feel like you're just screaming into the void, and I'm glad that I'm helping. And it's such a low bar, right? But I'm glad I'm helping people realize that people in the Middle East are human beings and deserve recognition and respect, and that's such a low bar, but I'm glad that I can reflect some of your perspective. Obviously not the entirety of your perspective, but I'm glad I can like convey some of that to people in the Western world, and like you can see that like your messages and your viewpoints are getting through. So yeah, because I will agree, covering this, the media apparatus being brought to bear against Palestinians is immense.
Least qualified person ever to talk about this conflict. And yet, just because I relate some of the talking points that we say and we hear the whole time, people felt heard. And when people have this feeling, they're happy. They have this response. They say, "Oh my God, for the first time, the West are actually hearing our point of view." Some of the point of view might not go well with other people, but at least we have a conversation. And I think that is the reason why people reacted that
Thanks,
way.
Bizadu.
Yeah.
It's such an incendiary subject matter. I've never seen social media so ablaze with hostility on both sides. Did you actually, as well as enormous praise from the Arab world, did you also get criticized by some parts of the Arab world for not going perhaps hard enough?
Oh, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. The thing is, this is like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Right.
If you don't speak up, why don't you speak up? If you speak up, you didn't speak up enough. If you're done, why are you if you speak up too much, oh, you're taking all the attention on you. And I love that fact, because people always who accuse people of being the center of attention, they are actually not very happy that the attention is not on them. This is actually like a rule on social media. But yeah.
I didn't see part one. What are these people's opinions? Bassem Youssef is solidly pro-Palestinian. Piers Morgan is a churlish ghoul who frequently reflects conservative ideas. But like, even Piers Morgan has been looking at this and being like, the IDF is just killing civilians, right? Like that's what's happening, right? Like even Piers Morgan is recognizing the merits of Bassem Youssef's position, which is just like recognizing, like Bassem Youssef's position is just recognizing how this situation came to be and how genocidal Israel's efforts currently are.
Yeah, there was a backlash, but there's also a backlash from the other side, which I mean, here and other comedy clubs, I worked with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, Jewish, Christians, Muslims, Arabs, atheists, all kinds of people. And there are a lot of people who went into my socials like, oh, so you're a terrorist sympathizer now, you know? And I think it is important to have a nuanced, deep, interesting, intelligent conversation. A lot of people waiting for this are kind of like, yeah, Bassem, bury Piers, show him. And this is the problem with the news today. The problem is the news today, it's not about the news anymore. It's about the people.
Yeah, I mean, like, dude, like, also Twitter's just having issues today. Like, even Piers Morgan is like, this is pretty beyond the pale. This is like how are they, like, even their justification isn't working here. Like what is going on? And I think there was another tweet I remember from him. Recently here, I'm trying to see. Was there another one, or was this it? This might have been it. I might be attributing too much good faith to him. Okay. We'll just say it's that.
Giving you the news. So it becomes a show, a circus. Two gladiators in the Colosseum. Two pigs fighting in the mud. And this is why people don't get anything out of it. It's a circus.
You know, one of the things I heard a lot was, who is this guy? And they weren't talking about me.
Sometimes I wonder.
Now, obviously, you're very, very well known in the Arab world. You're known as the kind of, they called you the Arab Jon Stewart. and you're well known in America, but you weren't that well known, for example, in the UK. And I think what this interview did, it made a lot of people think, wow, all right, this is incredible. But tell me more about Bassem Youssef. And I did a bit of research into your life, and it is a fascinating journey that you've gone on to get here to Los Angeles. And I think it's worth just taking a little beat here to talk about this, because you began in Cairo as a heart surgeon. I mean, that was your career path.
Yes.
And you were a heart surgeon.
I was a heart surgeon until, I spent 19 years in that career, 7 years in medical school, 12 years as a practicing doctor.
Oh my God.
And 2011 happened, and the revolution happened, and I had my own show on YouTube. I did like small videos.
Well, I'm going to come to this, because I was by coincidence, I had just joined CNN to replace the great Larry King. And I hadn't actually done any live show. I'd done a few weeks since I joined of taped interviews with big names, Donald Trump, Oprah Winfrey, things like that. And I was flying back to Los Angeles when I got a message that Egypt was going up in the start of the Arab Spring. And I actually went to a studio very near here, about a mile down the road on Sunset, the CNN studio, the old Larry King studio. And I went live for the first time, and it was about the Arab Spring, and it was about what was happening in Egypt. And at the same time, you, in Egypt, were actually in Tahrir Square, helping wounded protesters, actually medically treating them.
I mean, this was a kind of movement that inspired a lot of Egyptians. At the time, I was in the hospital, and a lot of people just had volunteered. And
it just occurs to me. Sorry, this is somewhat related. My brain goes from one subject to another, like down multiple paths. This reminds me that I should probably play on stream sometime Revolution 79. Yeah, 1979 Revolution, Black Friday. Have any of you heard of this game before? I think it would be a good one to play on stream, specifically because I've actually talked with the devs who made this back when I was a video game journalist. But it goes into kind of the revolution. Oh my God, that's so loud.
Clear voice for the machine. Give us all the information about your collaborators and the details of your next target.
This is the future of Iran. See why I told you to save your film? This is incredible.
My part is taking pictures, not choosing sides.
Listen, you may not realize it, but you're gonna have to pick a side, okay? You may not want to, but it's gonna happen.
For the side that wants to win. Win?
Don't do this, Reza.
Reza, they'll take you to Evan. Where is Ali? This is not a game.
I don't trust this punk with his camera.
Don't do this, Reza. Reza, take care of him.
Do you still have the rolls of film from the pictures you took today?
I don't have to justify my actions to you. Get him a new ID.
Look up, I'm just a photographer, that's all.
You and your stupid camera!
I'm your family, we're saying.
Get up! Who did this to me?
You know what to do, Reza Jan.
It's about survival in this country, Bassem. Every detail, Reza.
Yeah, it's made by it was made by a couple Iranian game devs, and it goes through the like basically the historical happenings of like the 1979 Iranian Revolution. I think it'd be really good just to provide like some background for stream, you know. Yeah, kind of put together like a Telltale game. Yeah. Good stuff. Anyway, sorry, my brain went Arab Spring, Iranian Revolution, 1979, Black Friday. Revolution 1979. Yeah.
The nurses were just like giving us like supplies. Go,
Sorry.
Go, and we were going there, and we were basically tending to the wounded, because it is, and it kind of gives you a different perspective when you see helpless, defenseless people who are not armed, who are being beaten by security forces, military forces, being shot, being hurt, and all we can do is just like provide some medical attention, and it kind of gives you a perspective to see how humanity sometimes can show its most ugly face.
And the suppression of free speech, freedom of expression, the ability of people to say what they honestly feel about a situation, and the suppression of people's basic rights to freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. And that kind of like taught me a lot and inspired me to do the show. But
well, you start. I mean, it's a crazy story, this, and I want to tell it because you just decide to do 5-minute stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you are expecting a few people to watch it. And then literally it just flies, and suddenly you're getting millions of people watching this. And very quickly, one of the big networks comes in. And then you're suddenly doing this stuff for 30 to 40 million people. Like a third of the entire population of Egypt is tuning in to watch it. You're the biggest star of Egyptian television.
Oh, please.
You were.
Don't stop.
I mean, what an extraordinary thing, though, for a heart surgeon to go from helping protesters.
But by the way, just to make a couple additional connections to what we've talked about earlier. Specifically, one of the reasons the Egyptian government is hesitant to allow in Palestinians is due to the fact that in 2011, the 2011 Arab Spring that Bassem is talking about, brought about the 2012 election in Egypt when the Muslim Brotherhood's candidate, Mohammed Morsi, was elected. And he was then, like, overthrown by the military a year later. And, it only got worse from there, okay? Like, so Egypt has a very tenuous, or not tenuous, a deep distaste for the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas, again, is an offshoot.
Medically in Tahrir Square, the start of the Arab Spring, to within a year, you're the biggest star on Egyptian television. It's a crazy thing.
It doesn't sound as glamorous as this. It felt horrible.
Did it? Why?
Oh yeah, overnight fame, this
Scary.
size, it's toxic. Terrible. It corrupts. It goes into your soul, and it's not good. It's not. I actually didn't enjoy it. And the worst part about it is that, like, you're trying to do comedy in very controversial climate about very controversial issues. So you'll never satisfy people. And the problem is that people have these expectations. Oh, if you are successful in this, you must be successful at solving this. And when things are not solved, because politics, as you know, very difficult to solve, that expectation, this love, turns into hate. And this is one of many reasons that I had to leave, and I came here eventually.
Well, let's just take people through what happened, because they probably don't know, a lot of people. So during the presidency of Mohammed Morsi, who was a democratically elected...
Well, look at that. You know what? This is good. They're actually going into some of these connections here. I did not expect this much of Piers Morgan. I gotta be honest with you. My expectations were in the dirt.
You had relative freedom to start, but then the more you went after government propaganda, the more you stood up for the people against the government, then the trouble started. Morsi wanted to shut you up. You eventually get dragged through the courts.
I was arrested. I was arrested for one day. It was a warrant for my arrest, and then I turned myself in, and I was interrogated. And it was the funniest interrogation ever. And in my stand-up shows, I talk about that scene.
Because the guards were reading the stuff out and laughing, right?
Well, the guards were taking selfies with me, which is funny. Right. and the exchange between me and the prosecutor, general prosecutor, was extremely funny. I mean, I don't like to victimize myself. I don't like, oh, look at that. I actually like to find humor.
But why were you arrested? What was the criteria?
Oh, yeah. I think the list was insulting Islam, insulting the president, spreading false rumors, and disrupting the fabric of society. And it was, I think the people in the room didn't know what to do with me because they ended up discussing my jokes. So it turned
Oh no, he's disrupted the fabric of society. No one knows what to do with him now.
into a writer's room.
He's too powerful.
And I was kind of like, how do you think we make this funnier? And it was the funniest exchange ever. And after 6 hours, I was let go. And
Was it scary though at the same time that suddenly the machinery was getting a grip of you? Because it was to get a lot scarier. But was it in that moment when you first got arrested, you thought, I'm being arrested for breaching my freedom of speech, right?
for some reason,
Yeah, his
I just,
BWA
like,
energy was
went with
too
the
off the
flow.
charts.
I went to the interrogation wearing the big hat. I went to the show. It was just, I just wanted this to be a farce because I just like, you're really coming after the comedian. And
Because it was a farce.
I just tried to enjoy myself, but deep inside I was dying.
Well, you actually, it gets serious enough where you may have died because actually Morsi gets, of course, deposed. In comes General El-Sisi in a coup, a military coup, and he doesn't find satire a laughing matter, particularly when the jokes are about him. You get blocked. They literally block your show from...
Oh, BWA is just a like community in-joke satire. Just to briefly explain it. Growing up, I would play the table game Scrabble with my parents, and at one point I wanted to play Bwahaha because like I had read comic books and I had seen like villains. When a villain laughs, they say the word Bwahaha. And it would have been a really good word. It would have used all of my letters, incredible number of points in the game. And so somebody put into the text-to-speech dono something about bwahahaha to like make fun of me in like a, you know, fun way. But the text-to-speech read it out as bwahahaha, and then they had added like just bwa at the end, so like expecting the text-to-speech to say bwahahaha, bwa, but instead the text-to-speech did bwahahaha, BWA, and it was just really funny in the moment, and then it just kind of grew into like people ending their donations or gift subs with BWA. So, as soon as you said Scrabble, I knew instantly. Blah! Exactly, you get it. It should be a word. Bowser says it all the time in Mario games. I need a YouTube clip of BWA lore. Somebody clip this. But there you have it. That's the lore of BWA, and now people have done fan art of BWA, which is where you get the emoji that is currently going on in the on-screen chat.
Airing.
I aired one episode, and it's interesting. This is a very interesting story because the first episode that was aired after the removal of the Muslim Brotherhood, everybody was waiting to see what I will say. Because by that time, all of the Islamic channels that were, I mean, like me and Islamic channel, like it's like they had 5 channels and they were like,
well, now I have to test BWA.
BWA. Abyssalisk, thank you for the $5 dono and for that BWA energy. Thank you very much.
me and them going like that. They had like 5 channels that have only 1 hour a week. And then they were removed. And then a lot of the other dissident voices were also being shut down. Now, people are waiting. What will Bassem say? And on the day that the show aired, the next day I went out and everybody's like, good, at least somebody is speaking. It was a very controversial episode. Nobody liked it. And yet everybody liked it. Because people said like, you're supporting the coup. No, you're the Muslim Brotherhood. Everybody accused me of something. All I did in that episode was just being a mirror of what is happening in the street and showing them how ridiculous it is.
You didn't take a fixed position.
Well, my position, depending on what's your position?
What did you intend your position?
My position was to show.
Come on, Piers, how could you not laugh at that? He's like, oh, I was going to be a mirror. What was your position? What's your position? Ah, come on, that's funny. That's funny. Ooh, we do need a BWA mug.
Of how the people now was like, oh, we got rid of Islamic fascism, but we are heading towards another fascism. There was a song that I did that was very controversial. People, and it's very funny. The pro-Muslim Brotherhood thought that this is a disrespect to the people who died, and on the other side, the people said that this is a disrespect to the army. And when you manage to offend everybody, you know you're right.
Yes.
And then the people in the middle, it's like, oh, you weren't tough enough. And I was told, that's like, why didn't you go after? The ceiling of freedom just went down, and I was just like, it was very difficult. It is very difficult to go against an authority that was very popular at the time.
And especially a military authority with
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of experience
Oh yeah.
of weaponizing these situations.
Yeah.
You had death threats.
People will always choose, most of the time, they will always choose the military form rather than the religious form, because they kind of like, at least they are not infringing on my personal freedom. Not yet. But
You had threats on your life, didn't you?
oh, all the time. I don't talk about that because like I have been having death threats, like never stopped since 2011. Never stopped.
Have they continued since our last interview?
Oh yeah, they never stopped.
People threatening to kill you.
All the time.
Why? For what reason?
Oh, for just saying something that they don't like. Oh, because you are against Egypt, you're against Islam, you're against our president, you're against God. It never stops. It never stops.
It doesn't bother you?
I mean, if you die, you die. You know, if you die, you die. I mean, since when? Whatever. Like nobody.
The amount of joy this man has while saying that, honestly, kind of inspiring. Honestly, kind of inspiring. I hope I can foster an attitude like that, you know? If I die, I die. It is admirable, yeah.
Bodyguards deflected a bullet. You know, maybe the guy who was with Ronald Reagan. But
Yeah.
I think it's like whatever. Even like at a certain point, I actually had like private security, and then I told them I can't. I cannot live like that. If that's my destiny, if I die, I'll just die.
You end up with your lawyer saying you got to get out of here. You got to get out of Egypt. It's
Yeah.
getting too dangerous.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen. You're going to get arrested again and probably thrown in jail, or someone's going to try and kill you. And you flee to Dubai, and then you end up here in America.
Yes.
Was that always the plan, to eventually come to America, or was it expediency because of what happened?
Yeah, kind of it
Well,
is
it's
what
funny
it
that
is.
You said that
yeah.
because I visited the United States after the first year of my show. And a doctor that's there, an Egyptian doctor, has been there for a while. I said, listen, Bassem, you are very visible in the media, and I think you can use that to apply for a green card as a special talent. And I did. And it's like, I have like a huge show in
It's
Egypt.
actually the criteria, because I have the same.
Yeah.
Is an alien of exceptional ability.
Yes.
Is what they call you.
Yes, we're very-
Charmingly.
Yes, we're very
We're
exceptional.
exceptionally able aliens.
We are, but we're still aliens.
Yeah, yeah. I know, it always makes me laugh. But you can come in.
Sherlock Smoog. I have not gone over the Hassan Ethan situation, mostly because like that video is like 3 hours long. But I was thinking about maybe doing it tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling on that one. Because I know it's a big deal. It's just it's also just a long segment when there's so much happening in the world right now.
But you are an
You're
alien.
an alien, but you're exceptional.
Yeah.
And I just applied for it, and I got it. I got the time 100 that helped both from my application. I said, maybe I'm not going to use it. And then when that happens, ooh, the green card came handy. So a lot of people think that I'm here on asylum. I'm not. It was just a strike of luck.
You now do stand-up. You've done it for 5 years. And fascinatingly,
Not-
you do some of
Well, it's less old news now because Ethan seems more inclined towards never starting Leftovers back up again.
it for an Arab audience.
You have a whole show in Arabic and
an English-speaking
yes.
version.
Yes.
And they're probably very different, right?
Totally
Because
different.
different sensibilities, different humor,
Yeah.
different crowds,
Yes.
different expectation.
Yes, well, when the Arab audience come to my show, they expect that's going to be another version of my show that I did in Egypt. And I said, no, it's my personal story. And that when the Arabs come to my English shows, like they think it's like an English version of their shows. Like, no, it's a different story. Even then, this weekend, right before I met you, because of our interview, I sold out Arizona.
Really?
Yes. And I stood, and the first thing I said, like, who here came because of the Piers Morgan show? I was like, ah! I was like, boy, you're gonna be disappointed because this is not about that.
But isn't that amazing? I mean,
Yeah.
that shows the power of that interview.
Yeah.
Resonating even in Arizona here. Amazing.
Yeah, because I don't want to succeed just because of a trending moment of time. It is the same show that I've been working and perfecting, and like any stand-up comedian in the United States, your dream is what? Is to sell your special to platforms like Netflix or HBO, and you want to get there. Because for me, that was like a rebirth. Because I thought like everything was lost. I came here, I had nothing. As first 3-4 years, it was terrible. The first 2 years I was doing stand-up. Oh, I bombed hard. And I went home crying. I said, like, I'm not gonna make it. And then suddenly I have already a tour. I mean, even before our show, I already had a set tour. And now I'm having like this ability of like talking to people with different languages, talking to all these different languages. The show that I did in Arizona had an incredible mix of Arabs and Americans.
Amazing.
And they came here and they completely, and there a lot of them came, they were Palestinians. And they came with like the Palestinian flags and the keffiyeh, and they thought, it's like, guys, it's like the way, laughter, being good at your job is in its way a way of resistance. Because when you laugh, when you show people that, hey, we have Arab people here, and they are, by the Arabs and Palestinians population in Arizona, one of the most established population in the United States. Arabs in the United States in general, they are like professionals, doctors, engineers, professors, even the Uber drivers. They are
well, I will
were
get
like
to
an
it, Sherlock
engineer
Smug, I
or
promise.
someone very established there, but he had to have like a step down in order to come here and survive. So, I mean, we hardly come find like illegal aliens here from, or people like came in with that.
It's just so fascinating to me. Maybe there's something about like being like in the medical field and transitioning into comedy. I feel like that is a not infrequent thing that I've noticed. He is really awesome.
Well, they're not qualified. So, and this is the problem of, this is why the reason people were very happy with our interview, because
Ken Jeong.
because part of the hate on both sides is that we see the news from a different perspective, and people here see the news from another perspective, and everybody's like, why are those people reacting like this? Because they don't see what the other person sees. And I hope in that interview that we can bridge that gap.
Yes.
Before we end, can I
Yes.
show? Okay. So this is a gift from me and my wife. This is olive oil from the West Bank.
Ah,
Whenever I go to Jordan a lot. But my wife also like ask for the oil from the West Bank.
it's very good.
It is the best oil ever. And the thing is, the olive trees, they survive up to 600 years.
What?
And they are passed from one generation to the other. And it is like a family heritage. And the way that you do it, so this is za'atar. Za'atar is basically thyme, and you add to it sesame and a bunch of herbs. And the way that you eat that, you take like a piece of bread. We don't have to do it now, maybe at the end of the interview.
Yeah, we'll do it, yeah.
And you soak it a little bit in the oil,
Yeah.
and then you take the za'atar. And I'll demonstrate here.
First of all, this seems delicious. Second of all, I love this idea to like connect over this interview with food. You know, honestly, one of the reasons I loved watching brain fart. Anthony Bourdain. One of the reasons I loved Anthony Bourdain so much was because he would do this travel and then like he would have like actual real conversations with people while eating their food and like coming to understand both their food better and also their culture. This is just good. I like this. This should be like more standard practice in like all interviews, in my opinion.
And then here.
I love it. Well, I love Arabic food. So at the end of the interview,
you're leaving with this oil. So
I
it's
will
yours.
take that.
It
And-
shows that.
Well,
yeah.
thank you. And it's very kind of your wife. Thank you. Thank you very much for me.
Well, I'm the one who bought it, but it's okay.
Obviously, you started the last interview with, I mean, I would argue savagely dark humour involving your wife. How you've been trying to kill her, and she was using your kids as human shields and stuff. And I'll be honest
And I'm
with you.
still trying to. But you know what? When I failed, you know what I did? I went out to the house and I just like randomly slapped other neighbors.
So,
You know,
it's interesting.
by mistake.
Now, this time I'm ready for you, okay? This time I'm ready for the humour.
Oh, you're ready? Okay.
No, but it's interesting because last time I was very taken aback. And I remember thinking, as you were doing this right off the top, I remember feeling very uncomfortable, unusually uncomfortable, and thinking I didn't know how to react to that. I didn't know whether I was supposed to laugh or be silent, and I sort of ended up sort of slightly grimacing, half laugh and listening. And then I realized it was very powerful what you were doing. It was satirical, but it was savagely satirical and extremely effective. And that's why I think the interview did so well. But I'm not going to pretend that I found it easy to listen to it or to react to it, because I didn't.
You know why? Because all I did was just take the talking points that's been in the media, not just for after October 7th, all through the conflict.
Yep.
It's always like, we need to kill it. All right. You need to kill 5? No, kill 10. You need to kill some? No, kill all. This is what satire does. It take reality, flip it on its head, exaggerate it, and then you can see how sometimes very uncomfortable and even sometimes stupid that sounds. Because I was just reacting to whatever the media is telling me. It's like, oh yeah, okay, do it. There's no pushback. So suddenly, the person who's proposing the most...
Why is this guy so cool? Well, one, it's because of how expressive he is, right? Like here. Just real quick. Yeah. Oh my god. Okay. Like, he's very expressive in a way that is not as common now in comedians. Like, he's got a very expressive face and hand gestures in a way that isn't as common with a lot of comedians. And he's got the riz, you know, like he's got the riz, he's got the expressiveness, he's got like he has a very grounded view of the world, which allows, and like principles, which allows him to respond to situations in a genuine way. But he also has a method for his comedy that allows that response that is 100% genuine to also be delivered in comedy, right? So like it's a number of these things adding up to him just being very quick and expressive and witty all at the same time, which is very, you know, easy to say, hard to pull off, you know. And plus he's just like he doesn't put on airs. He's just a guy, you know? He's just a guy.
Extreme measures like, oh, we'll take it, oh, no, that's too much. So that was like a very simple technique. I just took the talking point and just exaggerated it.
It was devastatingly effective, I thought.
Yeah.
First, before we go any further, how is your
Wait,
wife?
did Bassem Youssef actually like touch Piers Morgan's heart? Like, is Bassem Youssef responsible for like Piers Morgan looking at the bombing of the refugee camp and being like, this is actually horrible? Did he actually make Piers Morgan think that Palestinians are human beings? Because that's deeply impressive.
Wife's family, because she is half Palestinian.
Yeah.
Are they okay?
They're good. They're good. They are safe for now.
Yeah.
And as like the last week, there was no internet, as you have.
Yes.
You know, I saw you tweet at the IDF. It's like, how can they know?
You know how many views that tweet's had? Nearly 40 million.
Yeah.
Me just saying, how are they going to see this message if you've cut the internet off.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the IDF's like, why aren't the Palestinians liking my tweet? Because they don't see it.
Right? No, but I thought that was a perfectly
Yeah.
correct
Yeah.
assessment of it.
Yeah.
But the reaction to that tweet I did was enormous, as everything is in this thing. And I had a lot of people say, finally, Piers, you get it, right? Finally, you get it. And I wanted to say, listen, I'm trying to reach a place where I get this, but it's an incredibly complicated issue for someone who is not Arabic or Jewish to poke their head into. And I've had to...
And that's the thing. And I keep saying this over and over and over again, right? Like, if you acknowledge, right, apartheid is bad, ethnic cleansing is bad, and genocide is bad, right? If you can acknowledge these three things, it's not a complicated situation. At least morally speaking, it's not, right? And I think if you can come into the situation grounded with those three ideas, and like armed with, like, maybe even further with a couple more, like, killing children is bad, killing non-combatants is bad. Like, if you can come in with those 5 basic ideas, morally speaking, you understand the conflict between Israel and Palestine. You understand who's in the right and who's in the wrong here. It's a very low bar. The logistics around unfucking the legacy of, like, you know, the British Mandate and unfucking the legacy of, you know, the last 75 years of settler colonialism, that's complicated. But fundamentally, in the here and now, for this particular situation, it is uncomplicated in the extreme. Morally speaking, anyway.
To cover it as a journalist for a long, long time. I think I said to you before that I was editor of a Daily Mirror in England when we opposed the Iraq War, for example. So, you know, I have taken stands on this thing. On this one, I find, and I'm going to be completely straight with you, I discussed this with Jordan Peterson this week, and he did a pretty...
See what I mean, Chad? His face, it's so good. He doesn't even have to deliver a joke. He doesn't even have to deliver a joke there. Just like...
I discussed this with Jordan Peterson this week, and he did a...
It's so good, dude. His level of control is amazing.
Pretty incendiary tweet in which he said, "Give 'em hell, Netanyahu, enough is enough." And he was actually very self-reflective about that in the interview we did this week, where he later issued a 20-minute video, because he said sometimes a one-line tweet can be unnecessarily inflammatory to people. Much better to take time to explain it. Here's where I've got to with this conflict now. I viewed what happened on October the 7th as an absolutely appalling atrocity, a terror attack of unimaginable horror. And I absolutely think that Israel has a right to defend itself from the people who committed it, Hamas. And I've questioned for the last 3-4 weeks, what is a proportionate response? And I have said repeatedly, I don't know the answer. I want people who have a view to have a view about that. And I'll ask you again about where you think we are with this. I also acknowledge that Hamas live amongst civilian population in Gaza. And therefore, if you do what the Israelis are currently doing, which is a ground offensive into Gaza, a lot of civilians are going to get killed. And at what point does that become disproportionate or even illegal? And I don't know the answers to those questions. And I have a moral quandary, because my instinct is to say that Israel has no choice but to respond to what happened in a very forceful manner. I understand why they want to eliminate Hamas altogether. I understand that if they feel they can, then perhaps we can move to a two-state solution or peace or whatever it may be, although I don't think Netanyahu will ever be the person to do that. But the moral question for me is, at what point does this become disproportionate? And when you see thousands of children being killed in Gaza, it fills me with utter horror. And then people say, well, do you condemn it? And I find it very easy to condemn Israel turning off the water, Israel turning off the power. I think it's ridiculous that Israel should have that power over millions of people who are not part of their country. I think it's terrible what's happening in the West Bank with the settlers. I think that the stuff there is completely easy to condemn. But can I, hand on heart, condemn Israel trying to destroy Hamas after what they did on October the 7th?
You can condemn the way that they are doing that, yes.
That is where I'm struggling to find myself saying I condemn it, because I believe that they are right to try and destroy Hamas. Now, what do you feel about my moral quandary?
Well, there's a lot of points, very lot, and I think this will kind of like lay the ground rules for that interview. There is a whole thing about like Israel right to defend itself, the condemnation. First of all, let's start with condemnation.
Yes.
You want my opinion?
Yes.
Condemning Hamas or condemning Israel?
Yes.
Completely useless. Completely useless.
Why?
True!
I condemn Hamas, you condemn Israel, interview is over. What happened? Nothing. It is just checkpoint, like morality checkpoints.
But I've interviewed a lot of pro-Palestinians, for example, some of whom will immediately say, I unreservedly condemn the terror attacks of October the 7th, and then go on to criticize Israel. And I think that's it's a position I can completely respect.
Yeah.
But I find it much harder to respect a pro-Palestinian guest on my show if they simply resolutely refuse to say that they can condemn the terror attacks.
Yes.
I find that less worthy of respect.
But you see, this is the problem with the news. We go into the circular motion of the same answer. One thing that I have noticed, not just on the coverage of these events, the events before and before and before, every time this starts, people say, we don't know what's happening. It's a very complicated situation.
Right.
What is happening now? And for me, as a viewer, if a conflict that's been there for 75 years and the media with all this technology has been covering it and we hear the same exact words, we don't know what's happening. It's complicated. It's a very complex. That is a failure of the media apparatus. That is the failure to themselves and for the audience, because why every time this happens, it seems like it is happening from point zero. And I think to help understand that, I will get to the October.
Zumi dear, that's exactly what would happen, right? If Israel was successful in destroying Hamas, just hypothetically, right? And things went back to kind of what the status quo was, right? Israel's realistically only buying themselves like 10 years, 15 years until, the children who lived through this are radicalized by it and grow up to be angry adults who want to do something about this horrific situation they've been stuck in, right? Like, it is the inevitable outcome. It's I quoted a week or so ago Martin Luther King Jr., but like a riot, in the same way a riot is the language of the unheard, like similarly militant responses to oppression are also the language of the unheard. More organized militant expressions are the language of the unheard in even more oppressive situations. So like it's not unexpected. And in fact, by the way, if you read what some of the more moderate members of Israel's military say on the subject, they know that. They know that keeping Palestinians in such horrific conditions under such oppression is going to result in outbursts of violence like this. They know that. And yet, the political powers that be under Benjamin Netanyahu and Likud continue to oppress Palestinians despite knowing that this is the inevitable result. Because they, the far right, the extreme far right, the fascists in Israel, know that these violent outbursts in the past have allowed them to consolidate power, get more territory and land, and be hailed as heroes. You know, like it helps them. It's what they cultivate. So yeah, even if they did get rid of Hamas today, there would be a Hamas tomorrow. Or, you know, Hamas 2 tomorrow.
I will get to the condemnation. I will get to the self-defense. But I think maybe we can do, we have like all the time in the world, and we can discuss, this interview could be a bookmark, landmark for maybe looking at that conflict in a deeper way that nobody had gone there before. We have the views, we have people waiting.
Yes.
You know, as I said, I'm the least qualified to discuss that, but it's an opportunity to use it.
I'm not massively well qualified myself.
Yeah, both of us. Like, I mean, look at us.
I'm an Irish Catholic.
I
right?
mean, look at us. Yeah, two privileged people. One white, one white wannabe, discussing the most complex conflict of our history. But I want to start in a totally different area. I want to start with anti-Semitism.
Yes.
I think it's an important issue.
Yes.
I think there is a rise of anti-Semitism in the world, and I think there is. This is very dangerous. And I, as a
Good
Muslim
night, little morphine Annie.
who has been through events where there were terrorist attacks somewhere, and that reflects to us, on us, I can completely feel that. Since what happened, I had text messages from the Jewish friends. Are you okay? Are your wife's family okay? And I was texting them. Are you okay? And I think it is very important to agree on the language, because the word anti-Semite has been used and abused, and most of the time not for the good interest of the Jewish people. Because the first 2 days of the coverage, I watched the news, and there was a lot of protest that was led by Jewish Voice for Peace. And they were led by people who opposed the Israeli attack on the civilians. And I remember quite well, many of the Republican representatives in Congress came out and they were calling these the global intifada, the global jihad. I love it when they say jihad. They sound like a horse. Jihad. Or they say like, these are, and I quote, Iranian-backed jihadists. And I said, wait a minute, but most of those people are Jewish. Those people who took over the Capitol, the same people who took over Central Station in New York, which is known as the biggest civil disobedience event in America in the last 2 decades, they were all Jewish. And then I find Nikki Haley saying anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. And then I remember it's like, oh, Jewish people in America are saddled by the fact that they are not citizens of America or citizens of the world, but they are citizens of Israel, and they have to back Israel in whatever they do. And these are not my words; these are the words of Jon Stewart. He went out and he said it's very, very important to divide these two. And what is very, very interesting.
Would you compare that on that specific point to the way that people try and say all Palestinians
we're about 30 minutes into it, peaceful
are
warrior.
responsible and accountable for what Hamas do?
Yes, yeah.
In other words, I think you can be very critical of Israeli government and their policies and Benjamin Netanyahu and the politicians, but that doesn't mean that you have to take that criticism to innocent Israelis who may have exactly the same criticism themselves.
And this is why it is very important to have these kind of discussions, because the saddest thing that I saw is the people that were in so much support of Israel are anti-Semite themselves. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, she said like, oh, I send my aides, and they took pictures of the protesters. Basically, she's surveilling protesters. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is very known for a very famous post in 2018 where she blamed the California fires on a Jewish space laser gun.
Yep.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that? It's just like, oh, they were burned because Jewish investors, Rothschild and Feinstein, anything that ends with Stein, because that's of course sounds Jewish. They put a satellite and shooting laser beams to. It's
possible.
And not just her. You have Steve Skoulas, thank you so much. He is now the Speaker of the House, and he has been invited before for an organization that was funded by David Duke, the founder of the KKK.
Yep.
You have Kevin McCarthy, who is the former minority speaker, leader of the Republican Party in the House, and he accused Jewish billionaires of rigging the midterm. So how come those people are accusing us of anti-Semites? So here's the thing. So let's go to the equation that Nikki Haley put on Twitter. Anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. No, it is true. People who hate Jews, they're also anti-Zionists. It is true. And you could be someone who hate Zionists, who don't like Zionism, and you are Semite. You could even be Jewish. And guess what? You could be a Zionist, like those people, supporting Israel, and at the same time you hate the Jews, because the chant, Jews will not replace us, these echoed in Charlottesville. It did not echo in Gaza. I mean, in Gaza they say worse stuff in between the bombing, on their downtime. And these are the same people who are seen with Nick Fuentes, with Stephen Bannon. And you know what's most interesting?
Trump had him for dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
And all of those people are buddies with Benjamin Netanyahu. So how does this work? How does this work? And you know the people who speak against this, like Jon Stewart, like Bernie Sanders, like Naomi Klein, what do they call these people? What do they call them? Self-hating Jews. And you know what else now they call them? They call them capos. Capos. You know what's capos? Capos, basically these were the Jewish inmate in Auschwitz that were forced by the Nazis to stand as guards on their own
classic
inmates.
banana milk.
You see how degrading this is. And this is the way to shut down conversation. Anti-Semite, Islamophobe, you hate America, you hate the military, you hate Egypt, war on Christmas. This is how you shut an environment that...
Well, and frankly, like, the ultimate, like, kind of version of this is almost inevitably, you hate yourself. You know, you hate what you are. Like, that's kind of almost like after you've exhausted everything else, that's the place to go to, right?
Does not allow disagreement is not an environment made for growth. It's an environment made for control.
Let me ask you this. Say, take the student protests in America, at universities. I have no problem instinctively with students protesting. It's actually part of the DNA of being a student, right? But I do have a problem with two things. One, the protests that happened almost immediately after October the 7th, within hours, which were clearly, deeply, deliberately inflammatory and hurtful to Jewish people. Secondly, I have a real problem with the students who were beaming direct pro-Hamas slogans onto buildings on campuses in America. You know, I'm all for free speech, and I really am. The whole show is predicated on that. But not to the point where you see Jewish students barricaded into libraries because a mob is descending on them. There is a distinction to me between people who are obviously overtly, I mean, there was a professor at Cornell University who was literally seen in public shouting how exhilarated he felt by the attacks of October the 7th. He still hasn't been fired, that guy. I think that crosses a line. Do you?
Yeah. I do not like this way. I mean, I can understand why, but I don't condone it. I would never, because you have to understand these people, again, I'm not supporting them. I just want to make sure about two things.
Again, I'm not, I condemn Hamas, I condemn Hamas.
The reason that I started with anti-Semitism, because I wanted to make sure to clear any confusion that when I speak about Israel, I'm speaking about Israel.
Yes.
When I speak about Jewish people, I'm speaking about Jewish people.
Yes.
When I speak about my Zionists, I'm speaking about Zionists. It was very, because
I think it was very powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I have to be careful.
That's the first thing you did, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I tell you why does that happen, it doesn't mean that I condone it. There's a difference between explanation and justification. Those people who are exhilarated, the way that they, this is the same reason why people were so happy about the interview. What do they see? They see Israel as a criminal state who is killing their people, and in the same time, they are supported by the international community and the American. They have no guns, they have no superpower backing them. All they have is just feeling of happiness, like, yes, our enemies that we cannot touch them has been hurt. All they can think about, that these are their enemies that have been hurt, right? I'm not condoning this, but again, like when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, you know, against Western targets. Of course, I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been from a very young age. What have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of their brothers in Israel, in Palestine, in the Arab world are not being heard. People in Iraq, you know, like when America and Britain invaded Iraq, right? What the Arabs saw? It's like two superpowers are coming in on just regular people. So whenever there was like a bomb or like an attack on American troops, people would celebrate. Yeah, they're our enemies. Emotions are very inflammatory, and it is not right. But those people have nothing else. All they say is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just gonna scratch your eyes. I'm gonna scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No, but it is understandable. Again,
Exactly. It is understandable. And there's a difference between understanding a thing and justifying a thing. You know, there's that difference there. Martin Luther King Jr., by the way, when he said riots are the language of the unheard, he didn't say right after that he was pro-riot, that he was in favor of people rioting. No, instead, he condemned rioting. He did not think it was a good thing for people to riot. Just that he understood what made people feel like they need to.
it's not the right thing. But no, it's not like understand. It's like, oh, no. But again, it is an explanation. Now,
Yeah.
hate. And again, this is another way why this has been magnified in the media so much. What does the Western audience see? They see people rejoicing.
Yeah, I mean, this interview is about like an hour and 45 minutes long, Peaceful Warrior. Like, they clearly blocked off enough time for this conversation to happen in its entirety, and that's really, really nice.
For the death of innocent civilians in Israel. This is what have the Arabs seen for years on the Arab world. For example, if you look up Sidrot cinema, this is in 2014 when Israel was bombing Gaza as usual, and the Israelis in the Sidrot, the kibbutz or the settlement, they went on a hill and they had popcorn and they had drinks and they were like watching the show and they were cheering with every rocket coming down. This is what we see. Western people didn't see that.
Well, somebody found a tweet actually of mine from 2014 in which I said, at what point does what Israel is currently doing to the Palestinian people become terrorism? And because I've always said, you know, I've spoken about this a lot over the years, and I've always...
Piers, I will say this about Piers Morgan in this interview. He is incredibly defensive. Like, oh, well, I was saying things about this in 2014, but like, I care more about what you think now.
always tried to be extremely fair-minded, albeit nobody really wants you to be fair-minded. They want you to take a side. But that was clear that my thinking back then was that they were absolutely overstepping
Absolutely,
the mark.
absolutely. But again, to the point of rejoicing.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but like if you, for example, Google the wedding of hate. This is like an...
Yeah, by the way, so I was going to bring this up when we talked about West Bank, but the wedding of hate is one of the most odious things I think I've ever come across. Now, if you guys don't know what this is, I'm gonna give you guys a content warning. Actually, it involves some of the most heinous, I mean, just some of the most heinous things I've ever. It's like a multi-step atrocity, frankly. Yeah. So in 2015, right? An attack occurred on the West Bank. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what happens in the West Bank, essentially settlers just go to Palestinian homes. They attack them. They do unspeakable things to people. This is a relatively common occurrence. Okay? The goal being, like, force people out of their home, you steal their stuff, or just get them to flee the place they've lived in all their lives, and then you move into their home. It's yours now, right? Or you get, like, the IDF to come with you, and you just hire a bulldozer and bulldoze the home and take their land, right? This is common. Well, in 2015, one of these attacks took the form of an arson. And in this, it happened in this village called Duma. And it's hard to even say. This home was firebombed. The family was home. 3 people died in the home. And both an 18-month-old named Ali Dawabeshe. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Dawabshe, I think, is closer. Dawabshe was burned alive in the fire. And both of his parents died to the injuries they sustained in the fire. Now, yeah. I'm just going to go through kind of the steps that led to this real quick. Basically, there was an investigation. It was actually, this crime was so heinous that it was actually investigated, which is rare, okay? Basically, the attack had been planned in a cave that was, of course, built from previous Palestinian home. And afterwards, this place got turned into an Israeli outpost called Yishuv Hadat. And by the way, the state still plans to legalize this settlement, this outpost. Even though, again, it is straight up proven legally that Palestinians owned this location and were forced out with threats and violence. But in July, these 2 homes were firebombed by masked attackers. Yeah. I believe only Ali's 4-year-old brother survived, though severely burned. And I'm just gonna throw this up on screen real quick. In the smoking remains of the house was graffitied "Revenge." because they often a lot of these settler attacks are framed as, you know, revenge against the Palestinians for, you know, maybe rockets from Hamas, or you know, you looked at me funny when you were in town, and now I'm coming to get revenge. Again, it's revenge for any made up pretext. It doesn't matter, right? So, yeah. Y'all, so you all know that happened. One of the important things to take away from that is Ali burned alive. This 1-year-old baby in this home. Later that year, a video emerged online of a Jewish wedding in Jerusalem. And this marriage involved someone who was known for participating in price tag attacks. Now, just as an this is kind of the informal name given to these kind of retributive attacks, you know, that are, you know, revenge for some perceived slight. These can range from acts of vandalism, or they can and they can involve murder, you know, burning down homes, etc. And well, this video of this wedding show guests at the wedding stabbing a photo of the 1-year-old baby who was burned to death in the Duma arson attack. So guests at the wedding came up and just stabbed this photo of Ali. And it also included scenes of guests with guns, knives, Molotov cocktails, singing, "Oh God, that I may be this once avenged of the Palestinians for my 2 eyes," which is a reference to Judges, the book of Judges, except in the book of Judges it talks about the Philistines. And after all of the guests finished stabbing the picture of Ali, it was subsequently burned. And this, by the way, is not considered atypical in a lot of these settler colonial weddings. Scenes like this are reported to be fairly common. However, most of them don't videotape the evidence of this. Now, by the way, one of the people who is present is a man named Itamar Ben-Gvir, by the way. He was present at this filmed Wedding of Hate in 2015. And he is now the Minister of National Security in Israel. So that's how little people give a shit about this type of hatred in Israel. Okay? And as just kind of like another another aspect of this, right? The grandfather of Hussein Dawabish, sorry, I've been talking for like 7 hours. Dawabsheh, Hussein Dawabsheh, was apparently taunted by Jewish settlers outside of the courtroom during the prosecution here. And yeah, they chanted, "Where's Ali? There's no Ali. Ali is burned on the fire. Ali is on the grill. Where is Ali? Where is Riham? Where is Saad?" The names of the baby and his parents who died in the fire. It's too bad Ahmed didn't burn as well. The 4-year-old who survived. Police and court officials who were present did not interfere with the taunting. And by the way, in case you're like, oh, but Jack, that couldn't possibly be true. Here's the video.
علي بالجنة علي بالجنة يا بالجنة يا حيوانات الدول علي اين؟ مصر سكت الناس علي ولد صغير علي كيفي
Yeah. So it's not like the cops were super far away, not like the court officials were super far away. Just that is what it is like to be a Palestinian in the West Bank. Yeah. With IDF soldiers protecting them. They're gloating and laughing over an 18-month-old child who burned to death. And who was burned to death by people like them who did who figured that they were slighted in some way and wanted to harm some Palestinians, and they firebombed the house and burned the baby alive. And these people don't view Palestinians as human. This is what Ben Gvir said about Palestinians in the West Bank. There needs to be a full settlement here. Not just here, but on all the hilltops around us. We have to settle the land of Israel and at the same time need to launch a military campaign. Blow up buildings, assassinate terrorists, not one or two, but dozens, hundreds, or if needed, thousands. Because ultimately it is the only way we will seize this place, strengthen our hold, and restore security to the residents. Yeah, these people, when I say these people are genocidal, I mean it. This man attended a wedding where part of the wedding ceremony was was holding aloft like Molotov cocktails and guns and shouting about how they desired vengeance against the Palestinians while stabbing pictures of a baby who was burned to death by settler Molotovs. Like, I think a lot of people would change. A lot of people in the West, anyway, haven't heard stories like that out of Israel, out of the West Bank. You know, and again, there's no Hamas in West Bank. These aren't people being targeted because they're probably members of Hamas. No, they're just being targeted by random vigilantes who want to enact acts of violence upon them, their children, their property, whatever. So I think it's important to tell these stories. I know that was a major detour from the video, but I just needed to talk about that. I'm glad that Bassem Youssef is bringing this up here.
A Jewish wedding in Israel where they were celebrating the arsons and
No,
the
no, I've
burning
seen- I've
of
seen-
Palestinians.
But to be clear, I've seen lots of
No,
videos.
no, no, but like, I'm not talking to you, Piers.
No, I know.
I'm
I know.
talking to the Western audience because,
understand,
because
but
I want to see, like, I want to say, like, this is what they see. I mean, for example, there is a very famous video for Samuel Abu Za'anin, who is like a young kid that he was shot point blank by an Israeli soldier, and he was not allowed to have any medical attention. And as his dead body was being put into the ambulance, the Jewish settlers were cheering. So for an Arab audience, this is what we see every day. So when they see, oh, we heard them back, we heard their people like they heard back, it is not right. But this is what hate does. It escalates, it feeds each other. Radicalism feeds it. It is terrible, and it is just like a vicious circle. So I would like to do something that is very interesting tonight. I want, when I invited Jon Stewart to my show, as much of like a reception that if you see on the YouTube, people just like,
Yeah, sorry.
we had to cut the 5-minute standing ovation for broadcast. People were on their feet for 5 minutes. They could not believe it. I remember Jon Stewart telling me I could never imagine that a Jewish guy from New Jersey would have that kind of reception in Cairo. And yet, on the internet, people who would, what? You brought a Jew on your show? Why you are with a Jew? Yes, hate is there. Yes. So, and the thing is, like, why we do not see each other, people in the Middle East, people in the West, that we do not put ourselves in each other's shoes. And I want to do something very interesting today. I want to give, I like telling stories. And I'm going to tell you a very nice story.
Tell
and
away.
this is the story, surprise, surprise, of the suffering and the plight of the Jewish people. And I want to say that because it is very interesting when you see the trauma and the suffering that the people on the other side went through, you might understand why they're coming through. So this is, see this? This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews in Europe. They've been like, I have never seen a minority being kicked around this much, right? And of course, this comes back to the, you know, the whole idea about the original sin, that you have betrayed Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus is on your head. And then comes the 11th century. At that time, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. They were just peasants. Even some of the professions they were not even allowed to participate in. But they were allowed to do one thing, usury, money lending, because it was prohibited by the Catholic Church to engage into that. So what happens when you work in money? You get richer, right? And those Jews lived in ghettos. Now, ghettos was not just like isolated neighborhoods in cities. Sometimes ghettos were outside the city. This is like how isolated they were. And in those ghettos, they have to pay gold to the mayor or the governor or the prince or the noble. So they would see, you're getting richer. I need more taxes. So they pay tax. What happens when you have a business and they increase your rent? You increase your service. increase the tax. So what happened? The Christians started to default. And suddenly, the image of the greedy Jew was created.
I have a minor in history as part of my degree. Everything he's saying right now, completely accurate.
Shylock, Merchant of Venice. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. You know, like never did I see a creature I can't remember that. Never did I saw like a creature that looked like a man, so keen and greedy. Confound of a man. English. I messed it up. Anyways, but this was the image, greedy Jew, the greedy Jew. This was created because of their conditions, and
to be fair, like, while Shakespeare has nailed the archetype, it absolutely predated that, right? Like, Shakespeare was not the first person to come up with the archetype of or to come up with the idea of Jews being greedy, right? That was an invention of the bigotry just prevalent in Europe at the time over the course of many centuries. It's just kind of Shakespeare codified it in popular culture.
Became worse in 1095 when Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade to go and save the birth of Jesus from the unbelievers Muslim. And you know, this crusade did not kill a single Muslim. You know how many people they killed? 2,000 Jews. Because it's wait, the non-believers are all over there. Why? So they went to it's called the Crusades of the Rhineland. So they went to the Jewish community because, hey, we own the money, so let's kill them better than paying them. And
yeah, by the way, a lot of the Crusades went in this type of way, right? The Crusades were largely a way to preoccupy military forces. They were to get rid of monetary debts. They were designed to get rid of inconvenient people. A lot of it was designed in that way, or oh, hey, this is a great economic opportunity. It absolutely, very, very little of it had to do with religion. Religion was just kind of a pretext.
And then came the plague. And then all of the things oh, they're killing babies. Who would do that to a baby, you know? And they accused them of poisoning the well. This was the kind of oppression that the Jewish people went through. Fast forward 19th century, there was the Eastern Jew in Ukraine and Russia, and there was the Western Jews in Europe. Those people in the Eastern Jews had to immigrate because of pogroms, and they were kicked out. And at a certain point, the people in the West, especially in England, it's there are too many Jews. We need a solution. A solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even in the A list. Palestine was in the B list, because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews, 1903. And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options: Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar. And eventually they said, all right, let's do Palestine. So they went to Palestine in 1914. There was 700,000 people living in Palestine, 3% were Jewish. 1917, Balfour Declaration. Arthur Balfour, he called the Jewish people in England that they are alien and hostile race. And the thing is, the only Jewish member of the parliament, of the English parliament, Lord Montagu, he objects, these are British citizens, we should not kick them out. So they pushed them, but it was not going fast enough. Came the Nazis. And then it was not about the solution anymore. It was the end losing, the final solution by Hitler, because he needed an answer for the Jewish question, the Judefrage. And then, as you see, the Holocaust happened.
Yeah, again, Hitler's initial go-to wasn't mass murder. It was deportation, and it just turned into, well, deportation turns out to be pretty costly. What's cheaper than that? Well, ghettos are cheaper. What's even cheaper than that? Well, bullets are too expensive. What's even cheaper than that? Gas. You know? Like, it's so horrific.
Most orchestrated, industrialized, horrible genocide in our modern time. 6 million Jews died. So
Well, yeah, no one would take them, but they could have shipped them to Palestine, right? At the time, which was a place where people were being sent, Jewish people were being sent or directed towards, you know? But turns out shipping human beings from Nazi Germany to Palestine is expensive and difficult.
it accelerated, and they went. First of all, they left Eastern Europe, and they went to West Europe, and they went to America, and they were turned down, and they were pushed towards Palestine. So by 1948, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of like a land without a people to a people without a land was a marketing thing. They were already Palestinians. So suddenly, from our perspective, the Jewish problem is not a Jew.
I honestly, one hand wonder, he just wanted them gone, right? Like, deportation seemed, you know, like a decent option to him at the time, but ultimately we all know what he settled on and the atrocities that ensued.
Jewish problem is not a Middle Eastern problem, is not an Arab problem, it is a European problem. It was pushed on us together with the guilt because now we are the anti-Semite. Now we are the Jewish hater. And not just that, they took land. So people look at this like, why are we even, we had a lot of refugees coming in. And during that, there was a lot of, as you know, Zionist militia, the Aragon, the Haganah, all of these people were killing Palestinians. The famous massacre of Deir Yassin.
Yep.
You're talking about the atrocities of October 7th, it's horrible. But in the Arab mind, there is Deir Yassin, where there is an incredible movie called Tantoura, Tantoura, where the Israeli members of those militias, they talk about the atrocities that they did, including.
And by the way, like, the people who did those atrocities are proud of them. They talk about them openly in the movie. There are still people who participated in those massacres, active in Israel. Gay Aaron, thank you for the $10 dono, but we've talked about one. Ezra Yachin. He's one of those people who participated in these massacres and is now being trotted out by the IDF to talk about his experiences and improve morale by talking about the need to, the religious imperative Jews have to murder their Arab neighbors. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. We watched him do that. You can look up the segment on the YouTube where we saw him do that in his official capacity with the IDF. Like, this is not ancient history.
Opening up the pregnant woman bellies and having bets if the boy inside is a boy or a girl. It is one of the most horrific, and they talk about it, some talk about with regret, and some talk about with pleasure. We did that, right? So you have even King David. I think your Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, was there. And if I was British, I would question this. Because as you know, King David was bombed by the Aragon militias. 91 British soldiers died. I don't know, if I was British, how come my Prime Minister would have the nerve to stay in that hotel? I mean, you know, the ghost of the 91 British soldiers, that must be haunting for them, you see? So when you see all of that, and you see that suddenly, overnight, 1948, there were 1.5 million Palestinians, half of them, 3/4 of them were overnight pushed into refugees. Yeah. And this is why it's called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So now we have all of this building up into the minds. And suddenly this was like a conflict, a hate, a problem that we didn't have to do anything with. This was basically pushed on us by the Europeans. You see, this is why it is important to say that. And I'm not saying that just like, oh, let's wipe out the state of Israel, let's like push them in the sea. No, but it's important when you talk about the conflict that you talk about the root causes.
You got to
right?
know about the
No,
history.
There was like a vibrant Palestinian culture happening over there. And right now they are erasing this culture. Suddenly I'm thinking of like Israeli feta cheese. Israeli hummus. Oh, that's an insult. Israeli hummus. Come on. I mean, take the land, but leave the hummus, man. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not fair. You are someone who's always spoken against culture, cancel culture. Right now, a whole culture is cancelled.
Let me ask you this. Jonathan Friedland is a top Jewish journalist for the Guardian newspaper. He wrote a very interesting column last week in which he said, at the root of all this...
It's so weird that Piers immediately goes to talk about Jonathan Friedland.
You could argue you have two sets of people with just cause, and they believe passionately in their just cause. And he was sort of advising people not to take sides unless you really understand the history. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that both sides have legitimate just cause? Not with the methodology that's taken.
You were so close, Piers. He walked you through the entire thing. Dude. He walked you through the entire thing to the current state of affairs, and you're like, both sides? Question mark? I wonder if, I bet Bassem is going to, he's gonna do some sort of, like, verbal jujitsu here. Because he knows he can't, I don't think he's going to allow himself to be angry in this interview. I don't get that vibe from him. But I do feel like in this moment, he's feeling angry.
Taken place, and you've given an extremely detailed analysis of the build-up to what happened in 48. To me, it's pretty clear 700, 800,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes, and it should never have happened. And that has been absolutely, I think, the root cause for so much resentment. But can you, at the heart of this debate, agree with Jonathan that you could argue there's just cause on both sides?
There is a cause on both sides, but I'm walking on a tightrope here because I'm not a Palestinian. But from the Palestinian point of view, there's a lot of people. I mean, there are 2.2 million people living in Gaza. There are 3.5 million people living in the West Bank. There is 350,000 people living in East Jerusalem, and there is like 6 or 7 million people living outside. Those people, the Palestinians that were pushed out, they do not have the right to go back. Right now, if you meet Palestinians, you'll see them wearing a necklace with a key. That key is their house that they were kicked out from in Yafa and Haifa. You know, like my wife's family comes from Ramla, which is 50 miles from Gaza. And according to the law, those people have absolutely no right to go back. Even if you are a Palestinian with an American passport, they give you hell in order to go in. And yet, a Jewish person born anywhere in the world, born in Poland, born in Ukraine,
or who converts, by the way,
no question asked, he can jump on a plane, land in Israel, and get the Israeli citizen and take a house that most probably belonged to a Palestinian. So it is not just like it is an ongoing injustice that has been happening. Now, I mean,
where would you criticize, if you're being fair-minded, where would you criticize from 48 onwards the behavior of the Arab side?
Well, put yourself in the Arab side. At 1948, you constituted 70% of the population. Suddenly, the UN is giving you 48% of the land, right? Not just that, I mean, the Arab regimes, because they did terribly, and see, this is the thing, like, Arab nationalism at the height of these people feed on each other. You know, because it's very, very important to have a problem. Oh, it's Israel, and for Israel, oh, it's the Palestinian. It's a very good distraction. I mean, sometimes I feel that, like, the Palestinian.
Yeah, it's relatively recent, but yeah, Israeli court says converts to non-Orthodox Judaism can claim citizenship. People who convert in Israel to Reform or Conservative Judaism have the right to citizenship, the Supreme Court ruled, chipping at the power of Orthodox authorities that see them as non-Jewish. Yep.
Palestinian cause is very useful for both sides to stay there as attention because it's always a way to reflect. But, and this is a very important question because in the mind of the Western audience, they always thought of the Palestinian resistance or the Palestinian side as like Islamic, as militant. No, as a matter of fact, some of the early suicide bombers were female Christian Palestinians because they, like the RIA, you know, they were fighting for a land. The whole idea of Islamization of the whole cause came very later. As a matter of fact, you will find this very interesting because when I saw this, I did not believe it. This, you know, the Fatah movement, which is the PLO, the Fatah. This
Dude came prepared. He has a bunch of notes.
was their slogan. Can you see? You see there's a crescent, a cross, and a menorah. And they say unitary, democratic, non-sectarian. So basically in the 1960s, Fatah were basically marijuana-smoking tree-hugger hippies. And yet that didn't work, right? And the thing...
Yeah, like the 1960s, the 1967 borders would have been a, you know, off-ramp to a two-state solution here. Okay? Like, but frankly, the dope-smoking, tree-hugging hippies, well, they just got assassinated, frankly.
Thing is, I always hear that like Arabs were giving so many chances for peace. That is not true. As a matter of fact, all along history, Israel didn't give an inch of land by peace. 1973 war, they gave back Sinai because Egypt like initiated the war. 2006, they went out of south of Lebanon because of the resistance they have. Even the disengagement of Gaza, they didn't do it out of the goodness of their heart because they had too much casualties. And even the Oslo Accords, the peace treaty, the one that Isaac Rabin and got the Nobel Prize for, they did it because of the Intifada. So what is the message that Israel is giving to the Arabs? I will never give you anything with peaceful resolution. You will always have to fight for it.
Do you not think that, for example, I mean, Bill Clinton feels this very strongly, that there was a great deal to be done, and Arafat, just in the end, having indicated the whole time that if we got to this place, there would be a deal, just walked away. That was the closest that everybody came, and that actually, I mean, could Clinton have done any more than he tried to do then?
I am not, again, that's why it's very important to have people who are much more qualified than me to talk about this. But two things I can say about that. Number one, the whole thing about the Oslo Accord, there was a video for Netanyahu who was talking to the settlement offer in 2001, and he was bragging about sabotaging. He was talking to us like, I sabotage it, like there was going to be no peace. Yeah, you've seen that, right? Yeah. And in that video, if you remember, when he was saying like you have to hit them hard, 2001, no Hamas at the time. They were talking about the Palestinian Authority. We have to hit them, we have to kill them, we have to make them feel the pain. And then one of them says like Bibi, but wouldn't America kind of just like, so what? The American public is easily manipulated. 80% are with us. It is absurd.
True.
And as a new American,
I mean, true. Netanyahu, like, not only it turns out we're the American public very easy for to manipulate, but turns out American politicians very easy to manipulate as well. You just throw together a super PAC these days and funnel infinite amounts of money into their campaigns. And by infinite, I mean paltry sums. You can buy a politician in America for a few $1,000s sometimes.
Where I can have the privilege of being retrospectively angry. I said, like, this guy is mocking the government and the people who have been with him all the time. It's like, oh, they can be easily manipulated. They can do it. And even, by the way, even Isaac Rabin, the one who actually did the peace accord, he was known famously, say, the way to actually beat those children is to break their bones, called the broken bone.
I mean, Zoop, I think back in the day it was easier to manipulate the public, and now it's easier to manipulate the politicians. You know, back in the 60s, for example, or back in the 90s, you know, you didn't have super PACs. those got legalized with Citizens United, right? So super PACs now can just take all kinds of money and then funnel them into pet causes like running against politicians, or running opposition politicians, or running, people who are pro-Israel, or knocking anyone who's Israeli state goals out of office. Sorry, I'm bumbling my words a little bit. I think you guys get the idea. We're moving on.
Bombs policy. They will get those kids and break their bombs on the pavement. So this has the whole idea about Israel wanted peace and Arabs wanted to fight is a very
honestly, Zoop, it doesn't need to be as blatant as Menendez with the gold bars. It doesn't need to be that blatant. They can just donate $25,000 to a campaign, through a super PAC, and that's it. And then if you go against the Israeli state line, well, then they just pay a few $1,000s to run some ads in favor of your opponent, or some attack ads against you about how you're anti-Semitic. It's very cost effective these days.
I actually think as it's gone on, the genuine will on both sides for peace has not existed.
No.
I think it's been a deceit to the world.
No, I'm sorry.
And to the relative groups of people on both sides.
The official...
And actually a betrayal of them.
The official stand of the Palestinian Authority, and again, I cannot speak, it is very difficult to do this. The official stand of the Palestinian Authority is that we are just happy with 22% of the land. Just give us yes, there are people that dissent, but the thing is, you cannot just say, okay, let's talk about peace. And then you take away my land. Let's talk about peace. And there's a kind of passive aggressiveness happening. Oh, let's talk about it, but I'm going to build settlements. I'm going to suffocate your cities and your villages.
See, I think that has been incredibly inflammatory.
Yes.
Worsening the situation. I think putting back the chance of peace. I mean, Netanyahu, I interviewed Netanyahu earlier this year in the middle of the big social protests in his own country. And I couldn't understand what he thought he was doing, except that it seemed to me political expediency, that he had to get power, again, he had...
That is all Netanyahu has ever cared about. It's political expediency to get power.
Put a bunch of right-wing headbangers into his cabinet who have incredibly bad records, speak in an incredibly incendiary way about Palestinians, for example.
Piers, it's because they're fascists. That's what fascists do.
And he did this...
They literally... Netanyahu, just earlier this year, introduced legislation to remove any checks and balances on his power. The only check and balance on his power right now are the courts. And he introduced legislation to effectively neuter the courts and take away their ability to intervene. Netanyahu, when I say he's a fascist, I mean he's a fascist. It's not hyperbole.
For power, and then he launched a...
I will breathe a sigh of relief when Netanyahu is out of office, but until he is, I'm not putting it past him to do a power play, to be dictator for life. Okay, I'm not putting that past him.
Because they were pushing him to do it, a ridiculous assault on the integrity of the Supreme Court, the independence of the Supreme Court. And many Israelis rose up. So Netanyahu has become, to me, a big problem. Right? And the people, all the polling shows that. Israeli people are very unhappy with Netanyahu. I don't think he's ever going to actually want to forge peace. And in fact, I think he was instrumental with Hamas in wanting to keep them in power.
Piers, if you know that, explain all of your other positions.
Because he felt that would create the split with the Palestinians, with two political groups, and that would be good for Israel.
And it was leaked in a Likud conference in 2019 that he was bragging about giving Hamas money because this is a way that we can keep Palestinians divided, and yet and we'll never have one. So this is a guy who was.
But look, we can agree about Netanyahu, I think.
No,
right?
but not just Netanyahu. There's a book.
And I would say most of his cabinet.
There's a book called The Fear of Peace. It's by Moshe Zimmerman, and he's an Israeli historian, and he said like, the average Israeli citizen does not have a vision of peace. Because for 70 years, this is a country that has been, the war has been going on for, they have been expanding because of war, the military is taking over. So the whole idea of peace is not even there. It's not just Netanyahu. Like you have, I remember you have interviewed Naftali Bennett.
Yes.
And I think you tweeted that like that was like a very kind of reasonable take. Yeah.
I don't think that's reasonable. No.
Yeah, but like this Naftali, he went after Queen Rania, and he called up shame on Queen Rania.
No, I didn't say reasonable. I just said this. I did a fire emoji.
Yeah, yeah.
I just said what he was saying.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to ask you about Queen Rania, and let's ask about since you've raised it, because Queen Rania.
Okay, I'm going to pause here to use the bathroom because we're about an hour in. We about halfway through. How y'all doing? How you holding up? It's a lot, but I feel like this is a worthwhile use of our time. And I feel like I'm adding enough to it to make this to make this worthwhile, you know? Yeah, I'm gonna go and put on comfier clothes because sitting in this dress, I'm actually very chilly. It's cold outside.